had this open-ended time in a lot of ways to just think about what had happened and how I felt about it. And I write a lot about that. And then it takes a turn when I start dreaming about my mom.
Mm-hmm.
They're really vivid dreams. I start writing those down. They become a dialogue between us. And I make a decision as a writer, am I gonna write about these conversations we're having that I felt we were really having? I leave it up to the reader to decide what's happening there. But for me, it was important to continue the conversation with her. She'd always been this outspoken woman who had a lot of things to say. And I thought, I want to give her a voice to talk about her death. She would be the first person I would have called when this happened, say, God, we got to talk about this. And I was
Spill the
really
tea.
upset that she wasn't there. So I forced the conversation on the.
Yeah. I also found it really poignant around the coping with your own grief at the same time being cognizant of your son, Derby. I think there was a moment where you got flowers or something, and Derby said something like, nobody gave flowers to me, and I lost grandma too, right? I was thinking about that a lot in relationship to my own daughter because I also really tried to keep a joyful, forward moving experience for her. At the same time, really honoring those times where she was just breaking down and wailing like a mother who'd lost a baby. But I'm curious what your thoughts are now in hindsight about how you balance your own grief with an atmosphere that things are going to be okay for your child, because it is a hard balancing act. And I sometimes talk to my daughter today about, well, how did you think we did? And she said, I think maybe we could have aired more on the side where we just had full days of crying together. And I was like, but I remember at the time you were the one who wanted to go to the swings. And so we're constantly holding one another accountable for our belief system and also the way in which we coped. And I wonder where you're at now with those reflections on that.
So he is going to be 14 next month. He was 8 at 8.5 or so at the time. He's just always been this very curious kid, and we have always talked a lot. And I'm so happy that we have that foundation because he's at an age now where he doesn't really want to talk as much as. And I had a feeling that when this happened, he would want to know. And he did. He demanded answers and details, probably because he was a naturally curious kid, but also he was really close with my mom. He saw her every week. So there was no not talking about this. And because of how she died and because she had omitted a lot of details about her own mental health, she kept secrets, honestly. I thought, we're not going to do that. This stops here.
Mm.
So I made an intentional decision to be open with my son, to take my cue from him. But if he had any questions, to answer them. If he wanted to talk about it every day, then we would talk about it every day. I think in hindsight, it's only been 5 years, but I think that that was the right thing for us. Every kid's different though. And you're right. We really have to be delicate, I think, in terms of what we need and what they need. I didn't want him to see me breaking down every day, but I also wanted him to see me being real.
Yeah.
And I had to just constantly think, am I doing too much? Am I doing not enough? What is the balance here?
Yeah. I've often thought about that, the person who chooses to die by suicide is likely so in this cognitive distortion about their worth and their place and whatever mental illness they might be suffering from. But I've often thought whether there's any inclination of how will she explain this to the child? How will the child and she go forward with their grief? Is there, because I'm certain that if your mother thought about the complexity of what she left behind for you before she was sick, she would never have opted for that realm. And so I've always thought about that as evidence of just how powerful mental illness is. And that in the end stages of mental illness, suicide is like really someone whose illness has not been well treated with chemo or with any other thing where we try and we try and we try, and they're so sick we can't reach them. Did you come to the same conclusion with your mother? That her mental illness must have advanced to a stage where she just was no longer reachable?
I cannot speak for anyone I think it's so complex and nuanced, right?
Yeah.
I'm speaking from my mother, and I can only speak for her so far, right?
Hmm.
Knowing her the way I did come to an understanding that at least makes sense for me and that has helped me move forward. I write about it. I think that she was compromised, no doubt. She would have not made that decision just knowing what it would leave behind. She
Hmm.
wouldn't have done that. She cared so deeply about all of us. If she had any forethought that I would still be talking about this 5 years later, there's no way.
Definitely wouldn't have done it. Yeah.
At the same time, I do think there was some consciousness to her decision. Was it thought out rationally? No. But was there some thought to it? I think in her case, yes. That I think she believed that she was going to be better off and that she didn't want to be a burden to us. I think she was very worried about cognitive decline, even though all the doctors that she saw did not see any evidence of this. I think she was so worried and fearful about it that she decided, or the illness convinced her that this was the only safe way to play it.
You write that she was exercising her right to choose both how she lived and how she died. And I hear that frequently from older Americans who have had wonderful careers, beautiful family lives, and do not want to sign up to be burdens for their family. And I'm wondering if when you were going through this, you were reflecting on the larger trend of gray suicide and just how popular this method of dying has become with people. I'm not talking about assisted dying or, assisted suicide like we have in Oregon and California, but I'm talking about suicide. Did you reflect on that at all?
I don't think that's so. I mean, my mother was big on the right to die movement. Her mother was sick from Alzheimer's and struggled with Alzheimer's for almost a decade. And that was a big theme for my mother. She was very worried about that becoming something she might become sick with at some point. She did so much research on Alzheimer's. She was pretty educated about all that. I actually hadn't become familiar with gray suicide until very recently. I mean, I understand that suicide, the numbers are off the charts and it is epidemic of great proportion. I think that I believe that we all have free will and we all have choice. And she exercised her choice. Not a choice I like. I hate the choice she made, and I wish she would have seen a different choice for herself. But I think I came around to ultimately it was her life.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a fabulous place to land. And I don't know about you, but in the 5 stages of grieving that are so awkward to go through because they're not in order and they don't work, and then you find yourself circling back to 1, 3, and 4 again and again. I added a 6th stage of grief, which was forgiveness. I really did have to ultimately forgive my husband for exhibiting his free will, and that was his choice. And it did have incredible consequences for myself and my daughter and his family. But that forgiveness piece really helped me. Did you have to go through that?
Definitely. I mean, in terms of my stages of grief, I was stuck on anger for a long time.
Uh-huh.
I would circle back to that one quite frequently. I had to work through that. That held me for quite some time. I was angry with her choice. I was angry with her decision because I wished for her to have made a different one. And I got stuck for quite some time on, but you didn't ask me.
Yeah.
Like that I should have been included in the decision making. I
Mm.
mean, I might still believe that to some extent, but for me, I did come to a place where I think I understood why she would have done what she did and to just feel compassion for how scared and fearful she was to forgive to forgive that choice. Again, back to what we talked about earlier, the reverberations, the ripple effect that what she did has had on not just me and our immediate family, but the community. Anyone that dies this way, it affects so many. I wanted to forgive that.